October 7th, 1959, the world heard of the tragic and unexpected death of Mario Lanza. He was just 38 years old. Millions mourned the loss of a special talent, which after 10 years as a Hollywood superstar remained sadly unfulfilled. But it was a talent which brought the world enormous pleasure. I'm Kiri Te Kanawa, and this is the Mario Lanza Story on BBC Radio 2.
Be my love, for no one else can end this yearning, this need that you and you alone create. Just fill my arms the way you filled my dreams, the dreams that you inspire with every sweet desire. Be my love, and with your kisses set me burning. One kiss is all I need to seal my fate, and hand in hand we'll find love's promised land. There'll be no one but you for me eternally, if you will be my love.
The passionate voice of Mario Lanza singing his biggest hit, Be My Love, a voice that is said to have inspired the world's greatest tenors, Luciano Pavarotti, Plácido Domingo, and José Carreras.
Lanza is a combination of passionate feelings, a beautiful voice, a wonderful color, very, very communicative and extremely spontaneous. So I think that it's always a joy to listen again and again to Mario Lanza.
You inspire with every sweet desire.
There's a great purity, a sort of innocence in a way about Lanza's tenor, because it was just a kind of unencumbered voice. It wasn't hampered by too much technique. It seemed to me he sang from the heart. When you hear him sing, you can't believe that this man does not actually love singing. And to me, that's so important. Singing is, if nothing else, hugely emotional. And there's an enormous emotion behind Lanza's singing.
If you will be my love.
Broadcaster Alan Titchmarsh is one of the many fans of Mario Lanza, an artist who at the height of his Hollywood career sold millions of records. Yet underneath this extraordinary success, Mario Lanza's story was a true American tragedy, a tale of a glorious natural gift eaten up by the Hollywood machine and undermined by a talent for self-destruction.
He had a very short career. The real career was 10 years long.
Elisa Lanza Bregman is Mario Lanza's daughter.
And it was meteoric in many respects. It was also a tumultuous time, you know what I mean? There were extreme highs and extreme lows. It was a light that burned very, very brightly, and it went out way too fast.
No
The owner of that terrific voice started out life on the 31st of January 1921 as plain old Alfred Cocozza, the son of respectable but poor Italian immigrants in South Philadelphia, Antonio and Maria Cocozza. He wanted to be an opera singer. He didn't have his sights set on Hollywood at all. Jazz musician Buddy Greco grew up with the young Freddie Cocozza.
In my neighborhood, you were either a singer, fighter, or a gangster. This kid was really tough, but he had one of the greatest voices I've ever heard in my life. Now, my father had a little record shop on South Philadelphia, and Mario, when I knew him as Freddie, would every Saturday or Sunday come to my dad's record shop and play Caruso records for hours. And my father would say, Freddie, look, I have one little turntable, buy something because these people want to buy records. That there were times he physically would throw them out.
Maria and Tony, his parents, were passionate about opera.
Mario Lanza's biographer, Derek Mannering.
And he dreamt that one day he would become an opera singer. It's almost a cliche, really, but there are varying accounts that when he was 16 or 18, he discovered that he had this extraordinary tenor voice.
As an only child with a precocious talent, young Freddie Cocozza was idolized by his parents, especially by Maria, his mother, herself a frustrated singer. She evidently had a plan when she took on a second job to pay for Freddie's vocal tuition.
He went along to Irene Williams, who was more a coach than a singer.
Mario Lanza expert Armando Cesari.
And so with her he learned repertoire, a number of songs, a couple of operatic roles, and she was so impressed actually with his voice that she made sure that he auditioned for Serge Koussevitzky, who was the great conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra.
This meeting with Maestro Koussevitzky sounds like a straightforward business, but in reality, it was carefully orchestrated to seem like a coincidence. Maestro Koussevitzky had just finished an afternoon rehearsal and was resting in his dressing room. Freddie was conveniently positioned in a room nearby with the pianist.
I started to sing what I call my lucky aria, and that is Vesti la Giubba from Pagliacci, the opera by Leoncavalli, I Pagliacci, to be specific. Just when I finished the aria, he put both arms around me, kissed me on both cheeks in true Russian style, and he said, "You will come to live with me in the Berkshire Festival." And I realized at the moment that something terrific was happening in my life.
So the 1942 Berkshire Festival got underway that summer, with a new star tenor rubbing shoulders with a young Leonard Bernstein. But it wasn't Freddie Cocozza who walked on stage. It was Mario Lanza. Armando Cesari.
He had to change his name really because Cocozza is really a big pumpkin of a head in Italian. So he took his mother's maiden name was Lanza, Maria Lanza, and he settled for Mario Lanza, in other words, the masculine equivalent.
That summer at the festival, it was Mario Lanza's first exposure to the serious musical fraternity. His operatic debut as Fenton in The Merry Wives of Windsor was ecstatically reviewed in the New York Times. He was quickly signed up by Columbia Artists Management, but his excitement was short-lived.
I signed with Arthur Judson, who was the greatest manager. He signed me in 1942, and one day later, after I signed with him, I received a letter and it said, "Greetings from the President of the United States of America." And that was the beginning of 3.5 years in the Air Force.
It was a miserable Private Cocozza who reported for duty in late 1942. Relief only came when he was taken on by the Special Services Unit to star in Forces musicals. A sore throat ruled him out of auditioning, and legend has it he concocted an elaborate plan involving a Caruso record he had brought with him.
I thought, maybe I could substitute a little piece of paper over that and make it look like a homemade record and tell Peter Lindhays that this is me singing with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Well, I did.
His scam worked and drew an unexpected compliment from impresario Peter Lindhays.
Finally, when he did hear me, after the 2 weeks, he really liked it. And the classic remark was, he says, you know, you really sound better in person than those records.
The aria he sang for Peter Lindhays was the lovely E luccivan le stelle from Tosca. Also serving alongside Mario Lanza in the Air Force was the actor Red Buttons, who remembers that Mario's ability to sing was matched only by his ability to eat.
We were out at the Marine base, Pendleton. We were out there for a couple of weeks, and around the third day, some sergeant came to our barracks and said, hey, we've been watching this guy eat in your outfit, and we got a guy that is pretty good with the knife and fork, too. You guys want to put up a little money here and see, who can last in a eat out? Well, I mean, we went for every last quarter because we knew we had Mario going. I mean, this was the number one man. I mean, if you were a racehorse, he'd be man of war. And the last thing I remember seeing, and it's stamped in my brain, is Mario's foot was on this guy's stomach and he was dropping down lamb chop bones on him because the guy was out cold. Mario had out-eaten him with, 300 lamb chops, 68 pounds of potatoes, or whatever it was. It was a mound of stuff.
Mario Lanza's battle with his appetites for food, drink, and women was to become a lifelong war of attrition. For now, though, they seemed the innocent pleasures of a young man on the brink of a glittering career. He landed a chorus part in the Forces production of the patriotic show Winged Victory on Broadway. It was so successful that the cast headed to Hollywood to make a film version. Lanza's army buddy, the actor Bert Hicks, was also in the show.
Bert Hicks had a sister, Betty Hicks.
Alisa Lanza Brigman.
And Bert said to my father one day, boy, have I got a girl for you, as the story goes. And he did. And when my mother and father met, they fell in love. So he hadn't reached his fame yet. And when they met, they fell in love. They were just two young kids.
Mario and Betty were married soon after he was demobbed in 1945. By which time he was already making a name for himself singing for his supper at Hollywood parties and making influential friends. Armando Cesari.
Maria Margelli, who had been working with Ezio Pinza at the base as a secretary, became like a patron saint to him, and she took him under her wing and was able to organize some private recordings to be made. The interesting thing about these recordings is that they reveal the true size of his voice. The true size of the voice, which was really bordering more on the dramatic than the lyric, which is rather unusual in a 23-year-old. Hearing these recordings, you hear the full power of the voice. It's a very large sound, a dark sound, with this incredible fearless high notes. So very exciting stuff.
In these post-war years, Lanza's operatic hopes were still high, And in 1946, his new manager, Sam Weiler, found him the greatest singing teacher in the United States, Enrico Rosati.
Rosati was absolutely stunned by what he heard, and he said, I haven't heard a voice like this in 34 years, since I taught Beniamino Gigli way back in the early part of the century.
So for 15 months, Rosati set to work, making this already remarkable voice more spectacular.
De rosas de suave fragancia que le diera Marco a la Virgen Moreno. Granada, tu tierra está llena de lindas mujeres de sangre de sal.
I'm Kiri Te Kanawa, and you're listening to the Mario Lanza Story on BBC Radio 2. By 1947, Columbia artists were keen to get Lanza working, and he started touring with the bel canto trio alongside soprano Frances Yend and baritone George London. Everywhere they went, Lanza got the lion's share of the praise. But this was also the year that Mario Lanza's life changed forever, in the space of one concert at the Hollywood Bowl.
Ferruccio Tagliarini, the famous Italian tenor, cancelled. They had to find a replacement, and Ida Coverman, who was on the board of the Hollywood Bowl, had heard some records of Lanza, had also seen some photos, and she thought, well, this guy sounds like a god, looks pretty good, we'll try and get him. And this is exactly what happened. She succeeded in getting him and made sure that the big brass at MGM also attended this concert.
Louis B. Mayer from MGM Studios was in the audience.
Biographer Derek Mannering
Loved what he heard and what he saw, even though Mario was a little overweight at the time, and offered him a 7-year contract at MGM. For a young kid from South Philadelphia who really never managed to keep $2 in his pocket at any time, to have been offered this golden contract from MGM, it was simply too big to say no to. And initially, Mario had the idea that he would spend 6 months making movies and 6 months singing an opera. He was a little optimistic, for want of a better word, when he planned that. Because once the movies took over and the millions and millions of dollars started to roll in, there was simply no way back.
Now that Louis B. Mayer had found his singing Clark Gable, he needed to get him in shape for his first movie, That Midnight Kiss. Enter personal trainer Terry Robinson. He's now in his 90s.
Well, you don't turn Mr. Mayer down. He was the boss at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. And in his office was sitting a good-looking young fellow who looked a little chunky. And Mr. Mayer said, "This is Mario Lanza. I'd like this young man within about 30 days to lose some weight. Can you take a pound a day off him?"
This was the man who would become the Lanzas' Uncle Terry and a most trusted friend to both Mario and Betty.
She made us lunch one day, and she said, "I'm going to put on some music." And she put a record on, and I started to listen to it. And I said, while the record was playing, "That's the best I ever heard Caruso sing." And they started to giggle. And I said, "Oh boy, did I make a mistake? Isn't that Caruso?" She said, "No." She said, "That's your friend over there." I said, "What?"
Filming was delayed, so Lanza squeezed in an operatic debut as Pinkerton in Madame Butterfly in New Orleans, the only full opera performances of his life. He returned to Hollywood for his screen debut in That Midnight Kiss, and the movie-going public got their first taste of the unmistakable Lanza voice with the Neapolitan song Mamma Mia che vo sape.
Mamma mia, Madonna di perché estas mani non la so. Mamma mia che da sapere, mamma mia che da burra, non me fidava sa.
Mario, how do you like Hollywood now that you've completed your first year as a screen star?
Like it? I love it. And why wouldn't I? You know, I have everything I ever dreamed about. My wife, my baby daughter, a beautiful home, nearby another lovely home for my parents, and a beautiful, beautiful girl with a glorious voice as my screen partner.
Why, thank you, Mario Lanza. That was very gallant.
It's easy to see how opera would inevitably take a back seat now that Lanza was signed, body and soul, to MGM. Every promotional interview, like that one with his co-star Kathryn Grayson for That Midnight Kiss, was scripted by the studio. As a young child, Elisa was aware that her father was very much an MGM product.
It was glamorous to the public. I think in the 50s it was exaggerated. Everything had to look perfect. The studios owned you. And people would come to your home. We would dress up. We would do publicity shots. And it was just staged. You know, it was absolutely staged. But when they left, life went back to normal. Normal as it could be.
That Midnight Kiss was a big success, and filming began on movie number 2, Toast of New Orleans, again with Kathryn Grayson. But as Lanza's star rose, the cracks started to appear. Terry Robinson.
Things happened on the second picture which surprised me, and everybody on that picture started to drink. I never saw this, and they even drank on the set.
Once in a while he would start off the day roaring drunk, and that didn't go over very well. As a matter of fact, it went over like a lead balloon with the studio, let's put it that way. The people, you know, instead of knowing that he had to get up and go to work, didn't really care. These are the hangers-on. They were out and no drink, have another drink, Tiger, and, you know, and he did. And he wouldn't be in very good shape the next day. David Niven and I would black coffee and crackers and things to sober him up. And he came through, though. He came through beautifully.
Lanza's co-star and friend, Kathryn Grayson. Toast of New Orleans may not have been a landmark movie, but it featured a landmark song. It was penned by the great Sammy Cahn.
Chutzpah is a Hungarian word, and the classic definition is this chap kills his parents and he pleads for mercy because he's an orphan. Now that's chutzpah. But I say real chutzpah is me singing Be My Love to Mario Lanza for the first time. That's inordinate chutzpah. And he just stared at me, and he knew the melody, and he took the paper out of my hand. He just looked at me, you know. He looked at me, he gave me that look, and he started to sing Be My Love back at me. It was astonishing. And he came to that note, and hand in hand we'll find the one that there'll be no one but you for me, eternal. I just leaned back. I was afraid he'd break my glasses.
Be My Love sold more than 2 million copies and created millions of Mario Lanza fans worldwide, including a young Terence Stamp.
One of the things that I used to do with my mother was to listen to the wireless. She wanted me to pay attention because it was Lanza singing sort of Be My Love, which I think was his first big hit in England. And I was impressed in a way that I hadn't been before, really. I'm not sure that I had heard any really great voices prior to that.
After the success of That Midnight Kiss and Toast of New Orleans, Mario Lanza finally got to make the movie he always dreamed of, Derek Mannering.
The Great Caruso was released in 1951, and it had been the dream of its producer, Jesse Lasky. He bought the rights to Caruso's life story. And it was very much a Hollywood version of Caruso's life. There was no mention of his common-law wife or his 2 sons. But what made the film extraordinary is the phenomenal vitality and joy that Lanza brought to the role and to his singing.
La donna immobile, qual piuma al vento, muta d'accento e di pensiero, sempre un'amabile legge a droviso, in piano tuo in riso e menzognero. La donna immobile, qual piuma al vento, muta pensier di pensier di pensier.
I was only 6 years old and I went to the cinema near home in our neighborhood in Barcelona.
The legendary tenor Jose Carreras.
The film they were showing was The Great Caruso with Mario Lanza, and from the very first moment, this charismatic personality of Lanza, of course, also his beautiful voice, it was a kind of impact for me. And at that very early age, later on, I considered it was a little bit of an inspiration.
The first thing that really caught my attention wasn't even his singing an aria, but the first notes he emits in the movie, which he actually warms up because he's carrying the sacks of flour in the restaurant, and they ask him, Enrico, sing for us tonight, and he says, no, not too much flour in the throat, and they give him some wine, and he starts vocalizing. And the minute he emitted the first sound, I was immediately captivated.
The young Maltese tenor Joseph Calleja. Lanza's daughters, Colleen and Elisa, reacted rather differently to the movie.
My father dropped us off and said, go in, because he didn't want to go in, of course. So we go in and we're watching the movie. But at the end, he dies. Caruso drops dead on the stage, and that's the end. And we were crying and we were hysterical. And he hadn't anticipated that. Nobody had. Yes, it was kind of a shock.
In the end, it turned out to be one of the highest grossing films, not just in America, but throughout the world. And an album of arias called The Great Caruso became the very first of its kind to sell 1 million copies.
When The Great Caruso was released in 1951, Mario Lanza was a star. He was singing beautifully, he was adored by his fans, and had Betty and 2 lovely children to go home to at the end of the day. But even now, at the height of his powers, he was already sowing the seeds of his own self-destruction.
He just felt like he had no friends anymore. Everybody was leaving him, and the bottle was his friend.
I'm Kiri Te Kanawa. Join me next time for part 2 of the Mario Lanza Story, a Bite Your Legs production for BBC Radio 2.
La vita.
The world lost one of its finest voices, Mario Lanza. In his short and turbulent life, he inspired some of the world's greatest singers and amassed millions of admirers because of the expressive way he sang. I'm Kiri Te Kanawa, and you're listening to the Mario Lanza Story on BBC Radio 2.
Because you're mine, the brightest star I see looks down, my love, and envies me because you're mine, because you're mine, because you're mine. The breeze that hurries by becomes a melody. And why? Because you're mine, because you're mine. I only know for as long as I may live, I'll only live for the kiss that you alone may give me. And when we kiss, that is in thunder, dear. It's only my poor heart you hear, and it's applause because you're mine.
In part one, we followed Lanza from his humble beginnings as Freddie Cocozza from South Philadelphia to Hollywood stardom as Mario Lanza in the title role of the great Caruso. But if MGM boss Louis B. Mayer hadn't spotted him one night at the Hollywood Bowl, his journey might have been a very different one. One fan who's thankful for Lanza's career choice is the actor Terence Stamp.
I know there's a lot of talk about him, certainly amongst the singing community, that he never really stepped up to the plate because he never did these full-length operas and things. But to me, or to my mind, it's his role wasn't that. His role was to bring great music to scrubbers, spivs like me, you know, who would never have ventured into an opera house. Yeah?
His voice has a very distinctive burnished quality, coupled with an incredible extension.
Joseph Calleja is a young operatic tenor.
He has very resonant low notes, very beautiful burnished middle register, and a thrilling, exciting top. The incredible beauty and emotion he evoked, it was one of those rare voices that instantly speak to you.
Lanza could sing anything, from songs, musical comedy, operetta, Neapolitan songs, opera.
Lanza expert Armando Cesari.
His repertoire could go from Elisir d'Amore to Otello. I mean, how many tenors do you find that can do that? Not many.
When he's singing, for example, Cole Porter, when he's singing Night and Day or Begin the Begin, you know, I'm sure that Cole was writing about the beloved, but when Lanza sings, he's singing about the beloved. It's a kind of real spiritual experience, you know. You don't think of, oh, he's just singing about some girl he wants to get in the sack with, you know.
The one, only you beneath the moon and under the sun, whether near to me or far, it's no matter, darling, where you are, I think of you night and day.
That was a nice take of that first bit of.
It was very nice, actually. I mean,
I'm trying to sound like Lanza.
Well, you are. You're channeling.
It's Lanza's ability to sing anything that has always fascinated the young British tenor Andrew Bain. He's currently recording his own Mario Lanza tribute album.
Because you're mine, the brightest star I see looks down my love and envies me. Because you're mine.
I love the way Mario Lanza sings. I'm a classical singer who also sings lighter repertoire, and for me there is no one else who does that better than Mario Lanza. His versatility is incredible. When you listen to him sing lighter stuff with the same degree of passion, the same full rich tone that he sings in the opera, to me he's second to none. He was the first crossover star, I think, and maybe this was a problem. Crossover even today is regarded with quite a lot of cynicism by people, and I think Lanza suffered this more than anyone.
Broadcaster and opera fan Alan Titchmarsh agrees.
He seems to me to suffer as being one of those artists who had huge popular appeal, and therefore the cognoscenti rather sniffed at him. And it's something that still goes on today. Because the voice is so big, there are suggestions that it's uncontrolled. But if you listen to Lanza singing, there's enormous control in that voice. His dynamics are exceptionally good. And I think to write him off as just, a populist is a great mistake.
You're listening to the Mario Lanza Story with me, Kiri Te Kanawa, on BBC Radio 2. For Lanza, any movie was going to be an anticlimax after his triumph as the Great Caruso, but he took a violent dislike to the next film they offered him, Because You're Mine. On paper, he was perfect for it. It was the story of an opera singer joining the army. The producer at MGM was Joe Pasternak.
Caruso, I can understand. He lived Caruso. That was his dream. And I think he said, if I ever do the Great Caruso, I could die afterwards. And, after he finished the Great Caruso, he came to me and asked me, what's going to be my next picture? I said, a story that's called Because You're Mine, where you play a great opera singer joins the army. And he said, how can Caruso be a private?
The movie, of course, went ahead despite Lanza's protests and his disruptive behaviour on set. Because when things weren't going his way, Lanza had a tendency to self-destruct. Terry Robinson was Mario's personal trainer and his closest friend.
He used to punish himself by eating and drinking and getting big because he knew he could always take it off. And he resented some movies they asked him to make. One film he didn't like to make. It was called Because You're Mine. He was two people in it. He was thin and heavy and then fat. And they had a lot of problems cutting it together.
Mario Lanza's addiction to food and alcohol was aggravated by a belief that he sang better when he was big. So he would fatten up to record a film soundtrack, then slim drastically to appear on screen. This dangerous habit would always dominate his life. Peter Pritchard was Lanza's manager when he toured Europe in the late 50s.
On the train coming up from Rome to London, it took nearly 2 days, I recall, and Mario spent most of that time in the dining car. Mario could sit there and eat and eat and eat. And to safeguard ourselves, we used to have 2-size suits. The one that he would wear regularly, and we would have one which was roughly 2 sizes larger.
But Mario's excesses weren't always negative. Sometimes they were endearing. Terry Robinson.
As a lot of actors don't give you 5 cents. He was too big a tipper. One time he and I were having lunch in a delicatessen, and there was a record shop right next door. And he said to me, how much money are you carrying on you? I said, I've got a couple of hundred. He says, give me your money. And I saw him tip the waiters. I said, what are you doing? He said, these people are working for a living. You get that back. I'll give it to you. I said, I'm not worried about that. He said, and I'll get it back. I said, how will you get it back? He said, they'll go next door and they'll buy my records and it'll come back.
Drink, drink, let the toast start. May young hearts never part. Drink, 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 let every true lover salute his sweetheart. Drink, 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 you are
If the film Because You're Mine wasn't much to Mario's taste, then his next movie was much more to his liking. He was born to play the lead role in Romberg's operetta, The Student Prince.
All I ask is the right to see those smiling eyes beguile me.
But now he was a star. He wanted to have a say in the production. His daughter, Alisa Lanza-Brigman.
He had recorded all of the music and it was beautiful. But the director was a German man, and he told my father, Mario, you can't sing with so much passion. Don't forget, you're a German prince and you have to, you can't be as passionate. And my father said to the studio head, I can't work with this man. And I believe it was Dory Sherry at the time. And Dory Sherry said, well, that's too bad.
At that time, Mario was good friends with Al Teitelbaum, a man who would later become his manager.
I told Mario, I said, you know, Mario, it's not going to work that way. The studio cannot afford to have any actor tell them who's going to direct the picture and who's going to... In addition to that, you're under contract. He said, who's going to do the picture? They can't do the picture without me. They've got the music, but they can't use it. Well, MGM filed a lawsuit against Mario, and they got an injunction against him which forbid him from doing any other performances until the MGM picture was completed.
The unwillingness of the studio to give in to Lanza was almost certainly not down to a difference of opinion. He'd become notorious for his bad behaviour on set, fueled by drink, and his weight was, as usual, fluctuating wildly. In the end, the student prince was played by Edmund Purdom. He mimed Mario's wonderful recordings, which are favourites of the tenor Jose Carreras.
In what he was really extraordinary was in the American songs. Student Prince, for instance, I think is a proof of what I'm saying, you know, where he felt so comfortable, idiomatically speaking. Oh, the moon overhead, the moon is beaming. And I think that for that he was absolutely the greatest.
Overhead, the moon is beaming, white as blossoms on the bough. Nothing is heard but the song of a bird, filling all the air with dreaming. Could I hear this song forever, calling to my heart anew, my darling, while I drift along forever, lost in a dream of you. I hear your voice in the wind that stirs the willows. I see your face in the stars that shine above. Hold me closer, tonight we love. The willows bending, the stars that shine, the shorelights blending, they're yours and mine. Drifting along in my heart, there's a song, and the song in my heart will not fade. Oh, hear my serenade, my moonlight serenade.
When he had that awful crash with MGM over the Student Prince, he literally, for 2 years, he literally did absolutely nothing.
Lanza biographer Derek Mannering.
Which is, to me, is one of the really great tragedies, especially as his career in the international spotlight lasted a mere decade. I mean, he made his first recording in 1949 and his last recording in 1959. So everything that happened, the legend that he created in that decade. And for him, through his own personal demons, to shut down that career for 2 years was a real tragedy.
I'm Kiri Te Kanawa, and you're listening to the Mario Lanza Story here on BBC Radio 2. The Student Prince fiasco and his 2 years in the wilderness seemed to accelerate a downward spiral in Mario Lanza. His relationship with his manager, Sam Weiler, fell apart acrimoniously, leaving Mario and Betty in severe financial difficulty with the IRS. Betty was distraught and miserable. The effect on Lanza seemed inevitable. Al Teitelbaum.
Whenever he got very depressed, his solution was always the same: get drunk. He would drink some, socially, and he could be very, very funny. But when he got too much to drink, he could be very nasty, and he would lose control of himself. You don't know what he was liable to do.
He just felt like he had no friends anymore. Everybody was leaving him, and the bottle was his friend. He never was the same person when he used to drink. His enemy was alcohol.
Terry Robinson's friendship never wavered, but around this time, Lanza became deeply disillusioned with Hollywood and his place in it.
I went to a party with him one night, and it was a very big producer putting on a party. And during the evening, he said, "Folks, Mario Lanza's here. We're going to have us a nice evening of his singing." And Mario said, "Why did he do that? I don't feel like singing. Didn't he invite me as a man?" And we walked out. The next day at the studio, everybody was talking about it. So he didn't want to go to parties anymore. He stayed home. Because they didn't invite Mario Lanza, they invited a voice. And this was part of what he hated.
In 1955, Mario Lanza agreed for the enormous sum of $100,000 to an engagement at the New Frontier Hotel in Las Vegas. But at the last moment he cancelled, claiming a sore throat. The press were brutal and put it down to a drink and drugs binge. If one ray of light shines out from this gloomy time in Mario Lanza's career, it's the film Serenade. A critical, if not a commercial success, his singing on the soundtrack is outstanding.
A voice will darken gradually, but through a period of, say, 10, 15, 20 years.
Lanza expert Armando Cesari.
But Lanza hadn't sung enough for that to happen naturally. Now in Serenade, the voice is much darker. But he hadn't been singing in those 3 years, so the voice is much darker because of the drinking, the overeating, the punishment he had inflicted on his body.
Every word that I sing, right, I live it. In other words, meaning I sing each word as though it were my last on earth.
He felt everything. When you listen to him sing, you know that this man is feeling the words. You can listen, you can hear. It's like he's singing only to you. And he cared. And he was a very sensitive man. He was a very loving father.
Lanza's daughter Elisa was one of 4 Lanza children by this time. Her parents' marriage was a stormy one, but an enduring and loving one, according to Al Teitelbaum.
Betty was his greatest fan. I mean, as far as she was concerned, he could do no wrong. Mario was very much in love with her. This didn't stop him from having other love affairs, but he still was very much in love with her.
My poor mother had to put up with, the women throwing themselves at him. And, it's interesting. I can see, looking back in some of the interviews, she's just sort of off to the side, and the women are interviewing him, and she's just there.
Yesterday on Today in Hollywood, we had Esther Williams as our guest. And I told you how every male announcer here at KGMB decided that I needed assistance. This morning, I'm having trouble with the ladies of KGMB. All the girls want to help interview our guest today, Mario Lanza.
It gets to be annoying or irritating, that all these women are after your husband. I'm sure that was one of the problems in my parents' marriage.
While Lanza used alcohol and food to cope with his demons, Betty's weakness was prescription drugs.
The way she coped with it a great deal, instead of facing it, she would take sleeping pills and just sleep for 2 or 3 days. Several times we rushed her to the hospital because she had taken an overdose of sleeping pills.
So it's not surprising that by 1957, Lanza had had enough of Hollywood and took his family to Italy for a fresh start. But according to Terry, by now, Mario Lanza wasn't a well man.
I told him not to go to Europe. I said, wait, you're going to go to Europe. Let's get into better shape, mentally and physically. He took them to Europe, and I didn't go. That's the first time I ever turned him down. So what went on in Europe, I'll never know.
Many hoped that going to Italy would reignite Lanza's desire to sing opera. And though he talked of La Scala, money lured him back on set to make 2 more films, both shot in Europe. One, a mawkish movie called The 7 Hills of Rome, featured another favourite Lanza hit.
Goodbye, au revoir. Si ritrova a pranzo a Squarciarelli, fettuccine e vino dei castelli, come ai tempi belli che Pinelli immortalò.
In between shoots, Lanza embarked on a European tour. His agent was the young protege of impresarios Lou and Leslie Grade. Peter Pritchard.
When he was in a good mood, he was fun to be with. He was wonderful. When he was in a bad mood, duck.
Peter had the misfortune to forget to duck on at least one occasion, when Lanza was disturbed in his dressing room during rehearsals at the London Palladium.
The door opened and a photographer walked in. Chapo I knew. I pushed him out. I said, go out, As I turned round, Mario had snapped. He said, I told you nobody backstage. And with that, he threw a punch, caught me. I went down on the floor, come up. My mouth was bleeding. I went to Leslie Grade. I said, he's hit me again. Look. And Leslie said, well, this is disgusting. And he said to Val Parnell, Val, we're not going to handle this man.
Peter and Mario were friends again soon enough. But that night, Peter was taking no chances.
After the end of the performance, some of the stars were lined up to meet the Queen, to be presented to her, and everybody was very worried about Mario's reaction. And I was placed right behind him, holding onto his jacket. So if he leant forward, I would have to pull him back. In fact, he was wonderful, and he was very gracious with her.
Despite the change of scenery, Lanza's drinking was as heavy as ever. This very late interview with his old friend Peter Lind Hayes is a sad testament to this.
Where are we, Mario? We're in a room, and I am talking to the most beautiful, wonderful man in the world. The man who started me off in show business. You know something? My goodness, he comes in here tonight with gray hair. He painted it himself. I know he did. He did it.
By the late 1950s, Lanza's health was deteriorating rapidly. In his last years, he was a ticking time bomb of chronic complaints brought on by drink, food, and crash dieting. In a desperate attempt to fulfill a frantic work schedule, he started to experiment with radical weight loss techniques.
He had what they call a twilight sleep, so they would put him to sleep for a period of time, and he'd lose the weight rapidly. But the problem was that you can't lay down too much. You have to get up and move around. And he had the phlebitis, and a blood clot broke from his leg and went into his heart, and he died instantly.
Mario Lanza passed away on the 7th of October, 1959, at the Valle Giulia Clinic in Rome. By all accounts, he was singing heartily in his room moments before his death. He was just 38 years old. He had 3 funerals, all attended by thousands of mourners, one in Rome, one in Philadelphia, and the last in Hollywood, where he was buried. At the time, it was mooted that maybe the mafia were involved in Mario's death, an act of revenge for him not turning up to perform at a concert for mobster Lucky Luciano. But Elisa says this rumour was started by her grief-stricken mother, Betty.
I don't think she could believe that he could just die so quickly and so unexpectedly. She had spoken to him that morning, and my feeling is, in order to console herself, or to find a reason, that's what she told the family. But we'll never know.
Just 5 months later, Betty died too, from a mixture of inconsolable grief and prescription drugs.
Guardian angels around my bed, joining me in my prayers. They hush the shadows when they dance about. They shoo away the bears.
The Mario Lanza Story is a true Hollywood tragedy. Whether he would ever have made it as an opera singer is very doubtful, knowing what discipline, hard work and sacrifice it takes to be a Domingo or a Pavarotti. Even without the ruining influence of Hollywood, Lanza would have struggled to tame his innate impatience and recklessness. But in the end, such speculation is rather pointless anyway, because in his short life, he gave the world so much pleasure just by bringing Che gelida manina or Be My Love to an audience who would never in a million years have visited an opera house. I'm Kiri Te Kanawa, and you've been listening to the Mario Lanza Story, a Bite Your Legs production for BBC Radio 2.
Guardian angels around my bed, standing by till I rise. There's one with shining wings who holds my hand and shows me paradise.
He would sing us to sleep at night. And he would do the most beautiful song written by Harpo Marx. Harpo Marx wrote the music to it, and it's called Guardian Angels. And oh my gosh, when I listen to that, it brings back all my time with my parents, with him, with the whole life that we had, because I'd remember the tender moments, when he would come in and sing this beautiful song. It's so beautifully written, and it's so perfect for a child, to hear as a bedtime song. It just keeps you safe. You turn the lights out, you don't really need a nightlight.
Guardian angels to comfort me if I wake in the night. They gather all my dreams. Their halos are my light. They dry my tears if I should weep. They tuck me in. They rouse me from my sleep. Guardian angels around my bed, standing by till I rise. There's one with shining wings who holds my hand and shows